So in order to finish, I only want to give you a short overview, as I promised, where we stand at the end of the mandature. I just compiled that on the train, and it was a quite useful exercise because you never find these overviews where the different things stand. So these are the financial services legal proposals which are just in the pipeline, so already proposed by Commission. And it shows you where they stand. So we have the single resolution mechanism. I just told you about the difficult negotiations. Well, we still hope that we are able to finish it soon. Then there is the proposal for money market funds, which is one of the issues. So-called shadow banking is the fancy title for that. So there is a Commission proposal. Parliament and Council have not yet a position. And so therefore result will only be in the next mandature. Then there's the whole issue of card payments, famous issue capping credit card fees, capping debit card fees, and a lot of other rules. There is now a Commission proposal. There is an ECON position, but it will go to plenary. Council has not yet a position, therefore result will only be next mandature. Payment Services Directive is a reform proposal. Commission proposal is out. ECON position is there. Will go to plenary. No Council position. So will come only next mandature to be finished. Financial transaction tax, you know, that's a very difficult proposal. The proposal is out. The UK has and others have said they will not join. Therefore, it's now in the procedure of an enhanced cooperation. I see some smiles here of some of the people. So, but it's in negotiations. Parliament has taken its decision, but as it's a tax matter, we are not in co-decision. We have no power in tax. We have issued our opinion. It is now up to the Council to finally finish these results, but God knows when they will do. Banking structural reform. Michel Barnier has put out the proposal, if I may say that, a very watered down version of what Liikanen originally proposed, and of course much weaker than what was happening after the crisis with the Glass-Steagall Act in the 1930s. So, but it's the proposal is out. There's no position of anybody yet, and again, it's politically, I'm very interested how this will end up, because we know that France, Italy, and Germany are quite against already this watered down version. So we will see. Perhaps it needs another crisis to come to more serious structural reforms. Payment Service Account Directive. The main piece of this is that you can more easily switch bank accounts, and a European guarantee that each citizen of the European Union can get a bank account. You know, in some countries, people have big problems getting access to a bank account. If you don't have a bank account, you cannot use the common market. Therefore, this right is very important as access to the common market. We are negotiating at the moment in the trilogue phase, and we hope that we can finish it before the end of the mandature. Then there's PRIPS. PRIPS is for complex financial products, more uniform information sheet to consumers, which is potentially useful to more easily compare different financial products. It's at the moment in the trilogue phase, and I hope that we will finish it this mandature, but I'm skeptical. So I think it's more likely that it will be finished in the next EP. So then UCITS 5, here I'm rapporteur as well. This is mainly the consequences of the Madoff scandal for depositories. and for investment funds. We are in the very last phase of the trilogues, and I think it will be finished this week. So there's a trilogue on Wednesday, and I hope that finally I'm really fed up with this UCITS 5 for many reasons. But it will also regulate remuneration rules for the fund industry in the UCITS sector. There's European long-term investment funds, which is a proposal for creating a new type of funds, will come next mandate. Before that, there will be no result. The reform of the anti-money laundering directive, well, there's the proposal out, but not yet a position from Council, and there's a position of ECON, but has to go to plenary, so also this will not be finished this mandature. MiFID, MiFIR is finished. We are only in the very last stages of technical changes to the text agreed. We had to learn that sometimes if you agree, the Council opens up the text again. So anyway, it's now more or less done. It will be voted probably in April 2000, so this year it will then be done. So that's finished. Then benchmarks. This is the regulation of important benchmarks. Just a keyword, the LIBOR scandal, and the regulation is out, but there's no position of anyone yet, and therefore it will also be in the next mandature. And lastly, the resolution of framework for non-banks. This is going on, but not to be, I don't think, be finished this time. So, but what's the worst of it is 200 more delegated acts triggered by the Barnier proposal so far. I have not yet seen a full statistic of this, but it will be a huge amount of legislation to come. So this is basically the reminders of Michel and what Michel Barnier, and what will come out of that afterwards will depend, of course, also who will be the next commissioner, which majorities will there be in the parliament, in the commission. And that's because, in general, European lawmaking is a logic of in French you would say, rupture, so an interruption. After there's a new parliament, it's not taken for granted that legal proposals will be followed up. There has to be a case-by-case decision that a certain proposal will be upheld. So if I write next EP, this is presupposing that all the different proposals which are not yet finished will be carried over. Nobody knows whether this will happen. I have no experience. I'm curious. But I'm quite, I think, on financial services after the crisis, it's hard to imagine, I would say, that they will fall over the legislative cliff. So I think they will be carried over, but God knows. So it's something we cannot easily foresee. But I think it is more likely that they will not die. But I'm a bit more skeptical with proposals which are highly controversial. So we will see. So it's nobody knows. So, and finally, I would like to give you three insights from my personal insights, what I learned during this 5 years. I came from non-governmental organization. I was before rather organizing demonstrations, conferences, and so on. So I took a decision and say, well, I changed my life, and I really try 5 years. What can you achieve inside of an institution? And I played all the rules of the game. So I changed the rhetoric to be more effective in an institution rather than being the most vocal and aggressive and so on. So I really tried to change the game. I must say, one thing which made me very skeptical is one thing, and you heard this during all what I said. We are over-obsessed with detailed rules. Which overburden parliamentary democracy as well as stakeholders. My impression is these rules are so complex, so detailed, they are hard to understand. I don't speak about ordinary citizens, but I speak already with actors who are not in the largest institutions and have specialists for everything. And if you are skeptical, basically, of, or in particular also the state and its ability to enforce law, then you become very careful. So that's, and I think at least there's one thing we have to do in the next mandature, and that is we have to overcome this compartmentalization of financial services legislation. I can give you lots of examples where we have contradictions now. So we have some rules for loans in the property sector, which are different from the rules which we create for other submarkets. We have certain rules for insurances which cover exactly a similar portfolio as in banks, but they are regulated separately and differently. And this creates lots of possibilities for arbitrage. And we have other cases where, as basically very similar things are regulated in different pieces of European law, but they don't have the same revision periods. So that means we will come, say, 2016 to revise MiFID. I just give you an example. I'll say it will be 2017 or 18 we will revise MiFID. But then if we revise MiFID and change rules for consumer protection, we create an unlevel playing field with the insurance world. But we know insurances and investment funds, they compete for similar customers. That simply doesn't make any sense. So, and I think what we have to do now in the financial services sector is what we did before in European consumer legislation. We had before a fragmentation of consumer law, and then there was created one directive where they basically pooled the different laws into one. Of course, the bulk of the text is not changed because of this, but you get rid of all the duplications. You have then the same definitions, the same revision periods, and you fight overlap and loopholes. And I think we need this tidying up. And if we don't, I don't see us that we are able, in a democratic way, to take control still of this bulk of legislation. So thanks, Michel, for the whole list, but now we have to tidy up. So that's my that's one thing I'm pretty convinced of. The second is, I must say I see certain post-democratic tendencies in the whole process, and I think we should take that very seriously, because people they will react to this sooner or later, and officially it's all very easy. The European Parliament and the Council, they are the co-legislators, and no law in financial services will be posted. Will be decided without the full involvement of the European Parliament. That sounds simple. But the reality is that the roadmap is not written in the European Parliament or the European Commission. It is already written at the G20. And it is written in Basel. It is written, when it comes to accounting standards, we have this opaque body IASB, which I have a strong allergy against, I must tell you. It's one of the forces of the dark, if you ask me. With their, they have accounting principles which, for me, are not rational. I can give you lots of, and not true and fair. This is composed not of elected representatives, but by an opaque system of nomination, and they are determining the rules how all larger banks, insurances, and normal corporations do their books. This is highly interesting. Also, IOSCO is, of course, a body where you have very little parliamentary control. So therefore, the whole Michel's roadmap is in fact not his own. It was drafted, most of that was a fulfillment of G20 obligations. I don't criticize that. I think we need global cooperation. But it's also true that there's no global parliament. And that's, of course, something which people will respond to sensitively when you see that in the end you can use parliamentary power. But my experience is, if you look, the Parliament achieved quite a lot of things. So we made important changes to many of the texts. And we also got certain things which citizens wanted and the financial industry didn't want. So for instance, that there's now country by country reporting of tax payments by large banks. That's something nobody in the financial industry wanted. We only got it, to be realistic, because we could put it under the shadow of commitments at the G20, where they were not taken, but the EU governments were under huge pressure to fulfill the G20 rules, and then Parliament could use this as an opportunity to get certain additional changes. The same is the bonus rules. I know many in the financial sector don't like these bonus rules. It's true. Most citizens like these bonus rules. I think there would be more rational changes to it to be made, but the basic gist that people shouldn't earn absurd amounts also in the financial sector after incurring so hard costs. This is something most people agree with. This the Parliament could get, but we could only get it because there was this pressure to finish the legislation under G20 commitments. In general, it's very difficult to get something through the legislative process from the Parliament side which the offer side doesn't like. So in the legislative process, I would say there's too much power for the most powerful actors on the offer side and in financial markets, and relatively little power for the demand side. What, in particular, when it comes to retail customers, they are extremely weakly represented. Their resources are incredibly small. So the European Consumer Protection Organization in Brussels, they have 1.5 persons for financial services. Financial industry has about 700 lobbyists in Brussels. These are the rapport de force. And this, I think, is also very doubtful from a democratic perspective. And therefore, one of the lessons to learn is you can get changes as a parliamentarian. And I have my nice list what I achieved over the 4 or 5 years. It was certainly more than what I could achieve when I was outside Parliament. But when you put it into perspective, you can also become quite calm, to put it like that. In German, I would use the word of Demut, which I don't know in English. Well, lastly, perhaps one can say that in order to rebalance this rapport de force, I think it's very important that we get the public, the media, and civil society to become more interested in European issues, so that there is more of a counterpower to the strong representation of interests by the stakeholders who are directly affected by legislation. Well, these are some of the insights, and from my personal point of view now, I'm looking forward to the discussion. I only would like to say one thing. If you want to keep in touch, put here your email. I'm looking for more victims who want to get my emails, and thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Sven, thank you very much for this overview. It was very interesting to illustrate how to get this smart regulation between, meaning balance between top-down and bottom-up approach. I understood that in this European strategy, we were much more focused on what happened in the bottom and not enough on the top. For the next legislation, it's clear that we have to make the synthesis of all that and to make it all coherent. That is one of the major recommendations from the French community, is to try to cut this silo, to try to have analysis about the overall cross consequences of all this, those different type of regulation. I think we make a lot of reports trying to do that. Obviously, it's very difficult because the bureaucratic forces are still focused on the details, obviously. And it's important to have even the industry and the politicians to try to have the overall vision of what is necessary for this European construction.